everyone. My name is Laoise de Brún and I'm the founder of the Countess. I set up the organisation exactly 4 years ago, in secret. It was really hard because everyone was so terrified. Terrified of being identified, of being piled on and swarmed on by the flying monkeys online, of being doxxed, of having their names released and their location. They were scared of their employers being hounded. They were scared of losing their jobs. They had mortgages to pay, they told me. They had children to put through college. No one used their real name and no one gave their real location. I made a Twitter group and started to work up ideas, and in early summer I started to hold a weekly Zoom meeting, again in secret, which felt electrifying for all of us at those early meetings. It actually felt like we were a part of the resistance and it was Vichy France, and in many ways it was. I will never forget the feeling of sending out that first ever tweet out into the world. It felt like we were going over the trenches and into battle. I dedicated our work, as I do now, to all the mothers and babies, the generations who came before us and who were made to pay a high price. Our first ever communication out to the world said that if no one else would stand for the women of Limerick prison, we would. Within weeks, 40 NGOs had written a letter calling for us to be disenfranchised, to be stripped of our rights of political and media representation. NGOs including the National Women's Council. They had, meanwhile, redefined the meaning of woman to mean anyone who identifies as a woman, and they'd elected a father of 3 onto their board. But thousands of you answered our call and joined our campaign, We Will Be Heard. Together we ended the era of no debate in Ireland. Together we have stopped the HSE using dehumanising, insulting and demeaning terms like anyone with a cervix. And I want to shout out to Sarah Holmes, who's here, who was absolutely the forefront of that campaign and fearless in her campaigning. So the HSE were using this term, anyone with a cervix, instead of just using the word woman in their cervical screening. Together we stopped the Department of Education sending out pledge plaques to school children which would force them to pledge allegiance to gender ideology. Together we have defeated an amendment to remove the word woman from maternity legislation. We are fighting an ongoing battle with this government for our rights and for our words. Back in 2015, when they brought in gender self-ID, they told us it was about being compassionate. They told us it was about allowing people to be who they truly were. It doesn't really mean anything when you think about it, but it sounds good, doesn't it? It's all cloaked in sort of fuzzy, feel-good language. But 8 years later, we are wide awake in this dystopian nightmare that is gender ideology. Teenage boys who say they are girls are using the girls' toilets in schools in Ireland. Many schools simply remove the girls' toilets altogether, resulting in the horror for parents and distress for those girls. Children are identifying as the opposite sex, as neither sex, or even animals in classrooms, both in towns and the countryside and cities in Ireland. Girls are being tackled on the football pitch by men, and men, even rapists, are allowed into female prison if they say they're women. Men who say they're women are even beating up women in female-only homeless shelters. These are the unintended consequences of gender ideology and the GRA. Today, the same government are once again using fuzzy, meaningless, feel-good terms and language as a smokescreen to strip you of your rights. They say they want our constitution to reflect a caring society, a more inclusive society. They want recognition for care. But what does any of this really mean when 98% of care is still done by women? Exactly like it was in 1937. The figure hasn't changed. At least the drafters of 1937 recognised this. Women in Ireland do 38 hours of unpaid labour in the home each week. That's double the hours of caring of men and more than double the hours of housework. When we look at the rest of the EU, we're bottom of the league, along with countries like Malta and Romania. For instance, in Denmark, women are doing 16 fewer hours of unpaid labour a week. This is the reality of women's lives in Ireland. It's an uncomfortable truth for our politicians, whose chief concern seems to be promoting Ireland as the best little progressive country on the worldwide stage. It must be really embarrassing. But rather than address the structural inequality and, I don't know, maybe have the state step up and shoulder some of this burden on women, instead, they want to recast our reality. They want to strip mothers of enforceable rights, enforceable legal rights. They want to strip mothers of the ennobling acknowledgement in our foundational legal text of the profoundly important work they do, which is often thankless and often invisible. Article 41.2 never said a woman's place was in the home. It never held women back. But we have found, buried deep in a CEDAW document, a requirement that Ireland must change and remove its sexist language from our constitution. And of course, this government is following orders. It begs the question, who's really in charge here? How dare they tinker with our constitution? It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. It's our birthright. Let us not forget that it was this government that tried to delete the word woman from maternity protection legislation aggressively, retroactively and covertly. Our campaign, These Words Belong to Us, defeated that amendment. We view this referendum as a narcissistic assault on our foundational text and a grave insult to womankind in Ireland. We cannot let this vacuous yet authoritarian government remove the words woman, mother and home from 41.2 or the explicit recognition of the contribution of women. It's an outrageous act of vandalism to our founding document. How dare they? The people will have their say on March the 8th, and they will view this ballot as a means to dissent. So many policies have been forced onto the people in the last decade, but we're moving in the wrong direction. It's not progress. It is my view that we're moving away from any legal obligation upon the state to protect mothers from being forced out of work through economic necessity. It currently says the state shall endeavour to ensure, and that's enforceable in court. The state shall strive is merely aspirational. It cannot be quantified or tested because it's subjective, and they know this. A woman who spent her life looking after her Down syndrome son is suing the state, and her case is about to come to court to be heard by the Supreme Court in a leapfrog appeal. She will be relying upon her rights bestowed upon her in Article 41.2, but of course she cannot vindicate those rights if they no longer exist. And that is why this government is so keen to remove 41.2. They're in a race against the clock. Last night, instead of having the headspace that I hoped to have to write this speech, I was run ragged. I was treating threadworm. I was settling children, soothing children, and answering the demands of a crowd of teenagers who were moving through the house like a very messy and noisy herd of animals. I'm sure I thought to myself, I wonder if I was a man, would I just be in some study somewhere, uninterrupted? And maybe I would be. But as mothers, we put our children first. That is what mothers do. Raising the next generation to be secure is fundamental to their success and happiness. And it's fundamental to every individual and to society as a whole. Our Constitution explicitly recognises this. We are the ones who birth humanity. We are the ones who nurture the young of this species. Today, we invoke Bridget of the hearth, of fire, of childbirth. Before the famine and the church and colonisation knocked the fight out of us, we were matriarchal. Always remember that. Coming here today is an act of decolonisation. It is time to step into your lineage as Irish women. It's time to step into your power. We must and we will defeat these amendments. Protect women, protect mothers, vote no!